All right, it looks like it got started. So right at 6 o'clock. Hi to everyone that came today. We're so happy that you're here. Welcome to the Sustainability in the Business World panel. Before we get started today, I want to make a quick plug about the Environment and Sustainability Virtual Job Fair. This will be on Wednesday from 12 to 3. There will be over 15 local and national employers attending virtually, providing jobs and internship opportunities for students in the fields of food, environment, sustainability, forestry, wildlife and fisheries, tourism, national resources, all that stuff. But remember that you do need to register for the fair ahead of time to secure a spot. And there's going to be a group information session and one-on-one conversations with employers. So at the end of today's panel, Andrea will put a link in the chat for you to register. It'll be a great opportunity for people who are trying to find some sort of opportunity for the summer or a possible full-time job post-grad. So we hope you'll be able to make it. Now on to our panel today. This panel was put on by Erin Buchin, Grace Mungenest, Eliza McDonald, and myself as a part of the Career Center's Business and Entrepreneurship and Food, Environment, and Sustainability interest groups that have been offered by the Career Center. And today we will be cultivating an intimate and engaging Q&A panel showcasing different elements of sustainable entrepreneurship and leadership within environmental work. So by the end of today's session, you should be able to understand how featured organizations work to ensure their businesses practice are sustainable, recognize that sustainability has many aspects that are deeper than solely environmental, and just get a feel for what's out there. Just some quick housekeeping. We request that students participating please keep their camera and mics turned off for the majority of the panel and wait until the end for questions. We will have someone monitoring the chat at all times, so if you have something to say, feel free to write it in there. And with that, I will turn it over to Eliza McDonald for introductions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for kicking off our panel, Ellie. And I am Eliza. I am a senior at the University of Vermont, and I work with the Business and Entrepreneurship Group. Tonight, we are joined by 3 amazing panelists that are excited to talk about sustainability at their organizations. We have Graham Turk, Jen Swain, and Stacia Bentley from Jen works at Burton as the Director of Global Sustainability. Stacia works at Amy's Kitchen as the Manager of Sustainability Integration, and Graham works at Green Mountain Power as an Innovation Strategist. Just so before we get started, a little bit of background information and bios on our panelists. Jen drives strategic integration of sustainable business practices throughout Burton, affecting positive social and environmental change to help shape a world where all living things can thrive. She supports sustainability of the industry and advocates for a resilient, equitable, and regenerative future by serving on both the Sustainability Advisory Council and Recreation Advisory Council of the Outdoor Industry Association. Jen attended the University of Vermont, where she earned a BS in Community Development and Applied Economics with a minor in Food Systems, and an MBA and a graduate certificate in Ecological Economics. Stacia believes in using business as a force for positive change, and that is critical to create food not only healthier for people, but healthier for the planet. After graduating from the University of Vermont in 2014, she worked on sustainable strategy in the outdoor gear industry, then received her MBA focused in sustainability. She is now the Sustainability Integration Manager at Amy's Kitchen, where her focus is to embed sustainability into the organization's ethos and ways of work and get all 2,700 employees aligned around this. She has a specific focus on supply chain transparency, zero waste strategies, and accountability frameworks and reporting standards. Graham Turk is a member of the Innovation Development Team at Green Mountain Power, GMP. His work involves designing and administering innovative pilot projects in areas such as electric vehicle charging, energy storage, and responsive demand. These efforts contribute to GMP's larger mission to transform our energy system into one that is more distributed, carbon-free, and community-centered. Graham holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from Princeton University and was a Fulbright Scholar at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden, where his research focused on local renewable energy markets. On the weekends, you can find him exploring Vermont's beauty on the slopes, in the woods, or along its dirt roads. He can also sub in to play goalie at your weekly hockey games. So we have a great variety of guests tonight, and I am so excited to hear from them. I will pass it back to Ellie to get us started with our first question.
Thank you, Eliza. And so for questions, let's go in the order of Graham, Stacia, and Jen, if that's all right with you guys. And on to our first question, which is, did you plan to work in sustainable business? And are there any experiences that were particularly formative in ending up in this career path?
Yeah, so I knew, probably rare, and that I knew from pretty early on I wanted to do something in climate and energy. I think that took on some different forms. I entered college thinking I was going to be a chemical engineer working on novel solar panels, and decided like 7 seconds in that chemical engineering was way too hard for me, and so immediately ditched that plan. Then realized that software is a really cool tool to achieve a lot of our climate goals, specifically around the coordination of different resources. So majored in computer science, and ended up at GMP as kind of a result of doing some research in the year I spent abroad, and realizing that I wanted to be doing something more, a little more hands-on, working with customers, that you were able to see the impact of your work a little bit more quickly. And I feel that utilities are at such a unique spot in driving the energy transition, because they touch so many parts of the things we need to do, whether it's adding more renewables to the grid, helping transition to more electrified transportation and heating, or just being a resource to customers as they take those journeys themselves. So it's been a fun ride so far, and excited to be here. And thank you all for showing up. You've done half the work by just being here. I'm so excited. I'm seeing 42 people. That's like mind blowing how many people want to work in sustainability.
Yeah, we're stoked that everyone came here, and wonderful answer. How about you, Stacia?
Yeah, so thanks again for putting this panel together and for the invitation. I'm excited to be reunited with UVM. It's been a few years. So I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, where my vegetables came frozen in a bag, and we didn't talk about the climate, let alone it changing. And when I went to the University of Vermont, I did Trek for my first week, and that was the first time I really spent time outdoors. I thought I wanted to be an accountant, so went into the business school, but was taking environmental studies and listening to speakers like Bill McKibben. So within my first year, knew, I had a unique perspective with this environmental study background, and thought that there was a really big gap to bridge. And so I worked with my advisor to create a major business and sustainability, because that wasn't one being offered at the time. I remember taking a class, BizEd 295. It was a sustainable business class, and we were doing some consulting work for Ben & Jerry's and Seventh Generation. And, I remember that being really impactful, because, the area that you're in, you're surrounded by businesses doing good. From there, I worked in the outdoor gear industry for a little bit in sustainability and marketing, and then got my MBA focused in sustainability. Decided that I really wanted to focus in food, because there's so much opportunity, and that leads us to where we are today.
I think that Stacia and I kind of did a swap, because I actually, when I was first looking into what I wanted to do with my career, as an undergrad at UVM, I was thinking about corporate responsibility, but I really thought I was going to end up in food systems, like being the sustainable sourcing person at Starbucks, really into coffee ecology and livelihoods with Ernesto Mendez. If you haven't taken it, you should. So I started really with this broad perspective of, I want to be in making positive environmental impact, and I want to have a career in corporate sustainability. And I came from Jericho, Vermont, not far away from UVM. And was really kind of trying to find my way around the major. I was environmental studies, and I was environmental science, and then I ended up in community and international development with a strong focus on the environment additionally. So So really brought the people part into responsibility in terms of my academics there. I graduated during the recession in 2008, so I spent 2 wonderful years as a salaried nanny, and then I returned to UVM for graduate school. I pursued a traditional MBA. My intent there was, instead of pursuing a green or a sustainability MBA, was to actually understand what the people who are in power, who was holding kind of the budgets at the top of organizations at that time, how they were trained, so that I could better understand and speak the language to decision makers to really make the more of the conventional business case for sustainability. And I think fast forward a decade almost since I was in graduate school, I don't think that's necessary at this point. I think that we're really seeing a broader awareness of social and environmental importance and risk, as well as opportunity for business, which is really exciting. And then I additionally received the degree in graduate certificate in ecological economics through the Gund Institute. So really looking at the concept of externalities and how do we really start to look holistically at impacts, and how to really, again, kind of tell that story about all of the goods and services that were kind of being overlooked, not monetized, not considered part of the system. And so that was something I really enjoyed at UVM, was working at the Gund Institute. So if you have an opportunity to take a course there and you haven't graduated yet, definitely look into that as well. So I knew, from the outset, I really wanted to be in corporate responsibility or sustainability, and kind of found my way through large nonprofits, and eventually landed here at Burton Snowboards, where I've been working for 4 years, and I oversee everything from operations, sourcing, to consumer engagement, policy advocacy, and philanthropy.
That's great. Thank you all so much. I think that touches on a lot of what everyone that's here today is trying to get into, and maybe some of you even paved the way for them to take specific classes and different positions within the field. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Our next question today is, how do you, or does your organization, demonstrate to stakeholders, from customers to employees to investors, that you are truly a sustainable business?
We keeping the order? If I start first. Cool. So I think for our case, electric utilities, deservedly so, have earned a pretty bad rap in the sustainability and carbon mitigation front. I think for a long time they were very opposed to renewable energy, and that has changed a lot. I think the way that we think about it here in Vermont is that we actually have a very clean grid. So Vermont has, I think, the first or second lowest carbon intensity grid in the country. Vermont's challenges on a climate perspective are heating and transportation. About 70% of all emissions in Vermont come from one of those two sectors. And so as we think about, well, it's not necessarily exclusively our problem, but we are a means to get to that better future where you have low emitting sources for those two things. You can leverage a very clean electric grid to do that. And so the way, we have regulatory targets that allow us to provide incentives for things like electric vehicles, heat pumps, battery storage. But internally, I think the culture is very much, how do we help our customers make these decisions to transform to a more electrified life? And it's something that we harp on in the legislature, that we promote to customers. We work with nonprofits and advocacy groups and auto dealerships to help them see the benefits of driving electric and heating your home with heat pumps. And so from our perspective, it is kind of an all hands on deck approach, where it's not going to only come from electrifying buses or everyone buying an EV. It's going to be a lot of different solutions that come together to help tackle this emission challenge. And we feel, we're at a great spot to do it, because Vermont is very collaborative and people want to solve this problem, and there's a lot of political will to do it. And so it's fun to be able to work on it. And I think we try to position ourselves as, key in making that happen, because of the backbone of a really clean grid that we've helped fight for over the last 20 years.
Alrighty, I'll jump in. So I think it's really embedded into our mission and values. We were founded 34 years ago as a vegetarian and organic food company. And so I think that puts us in a position of strength. Last year in September of 2020, we were able to celebrate getting B Corp certified. And that was a tremendous achievement for us because it externally validated the great work we've been doing for our people and our planet, but also poses as a framework for continuous improvement. It's holding us accountable and allowing us to practice transparency. It fits our people, planet, and performance model. So, every quarter we're reporting on our internal goals and KPIs. And, I think there's also a piece around education, whether it's educating our consumers or our employees internally. I think for our consumers, it's about educating the impact of eating more of a plant-based diet, using your dollars as your vote, supporting organizations that are B Corp certified or, being transparent. And then I think with our employees, it's helping to, we're a sustainability team of 3. And so to get it embedded into every department and to make that team of 3, 3,000, like we mentioned earlier, is really our goal, so that people feel like they're empowered to make decisions around sustainability on their own for lasting change. I think it's also about, educating that the impact that you can have at work is much greater than you can have as an individual because of the scale of our organization. And so really just trying to get everybody focused and aligned around it.
Congrats on B Corp certification. We also became certified maybe a month after you, so you did a great job covering that. I won't go into it for Burton, but essentially that external validation, right, for all stakeholders, that there's a lot of complexity that goes behind social and environmental impact, and it's hard to tell the story to whether it's consumers or other outside stakeholders and our employees in a really comprehensive and consistent way. So B Corp for us really offers that stamp of approval that kind of tells the high level story. Burton redefined our purpose as a business about a year ago. So really core to our business now is that we fight for the future of our sport, people, and planet. And the way that shows up covers a number of areas of the business, certainly in the way we're designing and developing and manufacturing our products. So things like having Fair Labor Association accreditation, which demonstrates that we're really comprehensively across all manufacturing partners, ensuring that we're upholding the strictest and highest standards for fair labor and ethical sourcing practices. Things like certified ingredients for our products. So for outerwear, that's things like the chemistry that goes into the product. Actually, about 90% of the chemistry that's used in making textiles or garments is washed out and can lead to really horrible pollution. About 20% of the world's pollution comes from textile manufacturing. So we're addressing things at the factory level with both the inputs to the manufacturing and the emissions that come out of them. So it's about human and environmental health. So we're addressing, in that case, the stakeholders are actually the communities, the factory workers, right around the areas where the products are being made. And then when we pull it kind of forward to our employees, we offer volunteer time off 2 days a year. And one of the things that we offer that for is actually for activism. So how do we help bring our values to life within the company, but also how do we bring that stance forward for things like being very active on voting participation and climate change and increasingly climate justice. And so that pulls through to our key consumer stakeholders as well. So things like shutting down the company globally for 24 hours for the global climate strike in 2019. We used all of our offices and stores as community gathering centers. We didn't make a single sale, including online. We just diverted everyone's web traffic to the Global Climate Strike website. So ways to really show up in a way where it's not just about having a logo, it's not just about having the right ingredients, but it's really looking more comprehensively about what is our impact and our opportunity, especially as a brand like Burton, right? One of our biggest resources is our brand platform. It is our marketing. It is our ability to rally a community, especially like a snow sports and outdoor community around issues like climate change. And then the other thing I would say about, demonstrating authenticity in this work, that it's not just about sales and marketing, is the ability to collaborate across networks like the B Corp community if we talk about going across industries. But we're also really actively influencing the outdoor industry. And I think that the partnerships that we have with competitors are some of the most compelling because it's demonstrating the importance of the interdependence and well-being over the pursuit of profit. So we really try to kind of push the whole industry forward in our leadership efforts as well.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was so interesting to hear about how you demonstrate that and act on sustainability through your organizations. I'm going to pass it to Erin now.
So I appreciate how you all have been talking about the changing dynamics in each of your fields, and we wanted to sort of further that conversation by asking how in your interaction with sustainability and the environment, how does that coincide with social justice? And in your work, have you known that you can have one without the other? And feel free, anyone can answer in whatever order.
I could take a stab at the start. I mean, I think that historically, siting of electrical infrastructure, particularly generating plants, has gone in communities of color predominantly in a disproportionate way that has long-term health impacts, land impacts, and so there's definitely a reckoning across electric utilities. I think to first just admit culpability in driving those health outcomes in areas where there is siting infrastructure in places that are communities of color that didn't have the political capital at the time to fight against it, which is an unfortunate fact in utility industry widespread. I think that how we deal with it now is, one, in all of our programming, we make sure that if there's an opportunity to provide increased incentives for low and moderate income customers, for customers in Vermont from historically underrepresented groups in the energy transition, that we're doing that, because we know that we're not, one, we're not going to solve the climate crisis without everyone getting in, everyone participating, and everyone benefiting from the solutions. And two, I think it's something that industry-wide, in terms of this issue that we face, decreasing our emissions and our emission intensity. Who is it impacting the most? It's often folks who have not had a voice in the past. And so it's something that in Vermont, I think we've tried to make an effort as a company to be more inclusive also, where whether it's increasing our pipeline of how we're hiring line workers who historically have come from very, the same communities and from families in our company, and instead branching out to other communities that wouldn't necessarily think of working at our company. So pass it off to one of the other two. I don't want to take up all the time on this one.
There's a lot to talk about. Yeah, I think similar to Graham, it's, recognizing that this is a human-made crisis, that it was, created by mostly people in economic power and privilege and disproportionately affecting marginalized communities and communities of color. I don't think necessarily climate justice is a different action, but just a different lens to look at it through. And so, I don't think you can have one without the other. I think for us, I go back to, our organic roots of it's great for the planet, but we did it originally because it prevented our growers and our consumers from being exposed to these toxic chemicals. We know that in organic farming, there's usually lower rates of poverty and better livelihoods, but we have to go beyond that. And I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you can't have your basic needs met, then there's no way you can start thinking about things like carbon sequestration. My work touches it a bit with sustainable sourcing, so making sure that our suppliers are responsible and we don't have any risk in our supply chain. We're relying on third-party certifications, and we're also coming out with a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy. But I think for us, 2020 was, a wake-up call. I think that there's a lot of work to be done, and we're taking the time to listen and learn, and we're committed to doing this work, but it's definitely, there's a long road ahead of us.
So similarly at Burton, I mean, if we're talking about the broad scope, we also have put out a framework for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and I'm very excited that we've welcomed a new director of JEDI just earlier this month. So I partner very closely with her on this work, especially when it comes to things like advocacy and philanthropy to ensure this lens is pulling through. Gabrielle is very focused on our internal representation, our culture, inclusivity in the culture broadly, and snowboarding, as well as inclusion in the products, and diversity, inclusion, and representation is how we say. So essentially marketing and related efforts, the brand ambassadors that we have, how are we showing up in the world? For my work, I'm really specifically focusing on bringing the lens to our policy. So if we think about policy advocacy, in the state of Vermont, Burton was one of a few companies that were highly active in helping to get the Global Warming Solutions Act passed just last year. And the act specifically targets resources toward underserved communities and ensures seats on the Climate Council for marginalized and underserved community members as well. So really ensuring that it's not just that that we're looking broadly at it, right? It is a place of privilege to care about the climate crisis, right? Because we're not thinking about the immediate needs. And so really ensuring that we're bringing that, like what is the mechanism for bringing the policy to life? What does the implementation look like? Who is it going to benefit? And what does that transition toward a clean energy economy? If we're talking about climate, what does that look like? Similarly, when it comes to things like chemistry, in the state of Vermont, we've been actively working to help pass and actually draft legislation related to fluorinated chemistry, or PFAS. So that's like the drinking water issue. And so ensuring that we're also working on issues where we're able to contribute resources that are going to help, traditionally disproportionately impacted communities here locally in the state, in addition to kind of our broader work that we're doing on production and sourcing. So there's just a couple of ways that it's kind of showing up in our work on policy specifically, but we absolutely have to be looking at everything through that intersectional lens, especially when it comes to kind of sustainability priorities.
Thank you all so much. I think that there is a lot of work being done in the environmental world as far as social justice goes, but it's important to see that it's also working its way into other industries too. So I appreciate all of your answers, and I'm going to pass it to Grace for our next question.
So we were just wondering if you would be willing to describe some of your goals and targets for the future in terms of sustainability. If you've ever had to adjust goals that you've previously set, and how you're working on meeting and modifying them, some action steps, I suppose you could say.
Sure. So for us, I think our big top two high headlines for sustainability, one is a 100% carbon-free energy supply by 2025 and 100% renewable by 2030, which would be the most aggressive, I think it's the most aggressive energy procurement goal of any utility in the country. It would, put us on track to meet the climate targets from Paris, and then as part of that, using that very clean energy supply to drive what would hopefully be a tenfold increase in the number of electric vehicles and heat pumps. And we have the science. So Energy Action Network is a really good Vermont organization that lays out exactly what we need to do to get to Vermont's Paris targets, exactly how many heat pumps, electric vehicles, weatherization of homes. Oh, sorry. And so we know what needs to happen for us to hit those metrics, and it's nice to have that goalpost. So I think we are revising because there's sort of a fixed carbon budget that we have as a state, and as we get further away from that goal, which has unfortunately happened over the last 5 years, due to more miles driven in Vermont, it means that we have even tighter and tighter of that budget for the next 10 years. So in that way, it does change and it gets more aggressive, but we know what we have to do. And I think it's a point of leverage where we know, all right, if we're going to have to get to 90,000 electric vehicles by 2025, we don't have any time to waste. And thankfully, a lot of the auto manufacturers are getting on board now, pledging to only sell electric vehicles, which is really exciting. And we're going to be a big piece of that because we become essentially the gas station for folks when they make that transition. And that looks very different. People don't have gas stations in their garages, at least that I know of. Now they will. They'll get to plug in by taking an outlet and running it to their car. But it's an exciting transition, and one that has a whole host of health benefits in addition to climate, just with reduced pollutants in some of Vermont cities. So exciting place to be in, and could use a lot more smart minds like everyone on the call to be working on it.
Yeah, exciting sector. So, I think you talked about modification. We were lucky that this year we didn't have to modify any of our goals, because I think what's unique about a lot of our roles is that the projects we're working on are really long term and do take years to accomplish. At Amy's, we have an ambition of going beyond reducing our impact, but using our business to heal the planet. So very ambitious, but we have to look at, how we're sourcing our ingredients, how we cook our food, and how we deliver our products. So, there's sustainable sourcing, there's looking at renewable energy within our manufacturing plants, there's looking at compostable packaging and how we deliver our products. So there's a lot of different facets. Right now we're using B Corp to really improve and communicate that impact, but we're working really deeply to come out. I saw Jen just posted their external commitments, which is excellent. We're very soon and close to be announcing our external commitments. But, I think it's important that these are really meaningful, and that, we're going to do what we say we do. Right now we're signed up with Kroger. We're committed to cutting our food waste in half by 2030, but definitely more to come. I think there's another piece too that should be spoken about, and that's just the idea of, as a mid-sized consumer packaged good company, we have the scale to make meaningful change, but the science is clear, and we need to cut emissions beyond what Amy's can do alone. So, Jen spoke a lot to this pre-competitive collaboration across, different companies, across industries. And so, we're really trying to think about the transformative changes that are necessary. So, talking to our allies to make sure that we're all sourcing the right ingredients, or, working to build the sustainable packaging industry. So there's a lot of work to be done, but, we're excited to be working on it.
So, well, I'm excited to share that we just published our final progress report for our 2020 goals today. So I'll put that in the chat if anyone wants to take a look after. So, the work that I've been doing over, I guess, the past year at this point is looking to 2025 and beyond. So we can't announce anything yet specifically, but we're really looking again broadly at social and environmental impact. We're going to incorporate some of the JEDI work really directly as a pillar for our strategy going forward, and we're starting to put KPIs around that. And climate is going to remain, really core to our work. We're certainly going to set a science-aligned target, and also look at what does climate neutral, or as we're looking at it, climate positive look like for us. When do we think that we can make, a really ambitious commitment, but one that also is feasible, right? Because we want to ensure that we're not just kind of signing on to commitments as it's easy to do, but that we really feel like we're going to be able to make the measurable change to get there. And, very similarly to what Stacia was speaking about, we're really thinking about that beyond, right? Do less harm is incredibly important. And it's unfortunate that the way that the market works, that's where businesses are very often, is doing less harm. But how can we really move into the positive space? How can we do more good, kind of give back more than we're taking? And that shows up again, both on the people and the planet side of things. And then for us, we extend beyond snowboarding to general outdoors, but snowboarding, it's a sport that we've really pioneered, and it remains core to our business. And so just through the lens of how do we ensure the sustainability of our company long-term and the sport that we love and help to build, that really just remains a very core pillar for us. So again, making as much change as we can in our own business, we can kind of say greening our own house, but also ensuring that we don't take our foot off the pedal on all of the, system level change work that we're doing with state, federal, and international policy as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you all. And I really want to point out, I believe Stacia said it, you've talked about people, planet, and performance. And I think all of us have been drilled with people, planet, and profit. And I just love that different spin on it. So it's not all focused on monetary. For our final question before we open it up to the whole group for a Q&A, this is more student-based, and I'm sure students will want to connect with you all on LinkedIn or email. So within this question, if you wouldn't mind saying what you're comfortable with people connecting with you on and all that, I'm sure everyone would love that. So what suggestions do you have for students looking for sustainability-related internships or grads that are looking for a permanent job?
Yeah, so one thing I always come back to is like, I think it's so unique that we do have two people, Stacia and Jen, who work on this directly, but every company can have someone who internally champions sustainability and climate action. It often does not require a ton of expertise, but just the effort to put in a little bit of research to say, well, what is my company's largest contribution to carbon, and how can we change that? Whether it's a logistics company and greening up their fleet, or a company that can make a large procurement of renewable energy or change how it heats their buildings. And so one thing is I just, whatever you're interested in, there is a role for you to play in driving sustainability and climate action. Whether you're a marketing person or an accounting person, I think I used to think that there were like sustainability companies and then other. And as you can see from this panel, I think that's not true anymore. Any company under the sun might be driving towards these solutions by using what they do best as a driver for the rest of their industry, and to change their customers' minds in the things that they promote and support. So I think that's one piece of just whatever you like to do, there's a role for you. And the second would just be, I am a big proponent of looking at smaller places in not necessarily the big cities. I think those are great too, but you can have potentially even more impact and for yourself get access to decision makers and people who are really driving the change if you're going to smaller places that might not have 20,000 employees, but are going to have a room for you to make an impact. And I think Vermont, nice thing is there are not really any companies of that size that you get buried down on the totem pole. But I think as folks look to, especially after graduation, and start to think about where to live and work, I sort of, I would recommend at least giving a shot to some, smaller companies, smaller locations, because you'll have a huge opportunity to make an impact right away.
I love that answer. That was a great one. I think that's the dream, right? Is there is no role in sustainability, but it's embedded throughout the organization. I really like that. I would definitely recommend, you hear it time and time again, but do informational interviews, network. It's inconvenient and uncomfortable, but, all of my roles have been through knowing someone. So I definitely encourage that, and feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. And then I also recommend getting expertise and diving deep into kind of your passion area. So within sustainability, it's not all green teams and recycling, right? So going and getting educated on carbon accounting and life cycle analysis. I think being able, if you're interested in sustainability specifically, being able to point to, an understanding in this data-based stuff is better than just like having a passion for it. And then also Amy's, I'll just put in a little plug. They just launched some internships. We usually have a sustainability intern, 1 or 2 every summer. So feel free to check out our website.
Yeah, I'll just echo again, you don't need sustainability in your job title, and arguably you can make more impact in certain areas of the organization without it in a more direct way. So same Z's to both of you. I think, one thing that you could consider is that the internships aren't always going to be posted. At Burton, we don't offer them currently, and we unfortunately, unless you're looking for course credit, are not offering them right now. So I'll just say that up front. But a lot of times there are internship opportunities or job opportunities that could be available that haven't been pitched yet. So think about, what is your unique skill set? What is your interest? What could you bring to a particular company that you're really interested in? And maybe start a conversation through an informational interview that way. Especially if you do have the opportunity to offer it up as part of a course project. I've gotten a lot of experience through taking that approach. The other thing is thinking about potentially, pitching yourself for a fellowship post-graduation. So I got into the World Wildlife Fund after I already had a graduate certificate and a master's, because they really often hire for their fellowships for people who've just gotten out of college. So thinking about, you have that kind of sweet spot where you're in a transition period into a career potentially, depending on if you're a younger entry-level student. So really use that to your advantage, because I think you can get experience at a lot of really cool places because you're at that point, that transition period. And when you think about, hard skills, to Stacia's point, thinking about GIS, LCA, like what are those tools that companies might be using internally, where if you're able to walk in the door because you already had a course, you've already tried the software, I do think that can give you a leg up depending on the position that you end up applying for. So really thinking about, it's important to have all of kind of the breadth of context about sustainability, but really going deep in certain areas that align with a career path could be beneficial to you at the outset. So, and once you're in a company, you might even be able to kind of help them transform their program into, stepping into sustainability. So my boss, Allie Kenny, actually started our program in 2012 when she was on the snowboard manufacturing team. So she thought of this program. She was doing her MBA at the time. She pitched it, and she's been leading sustainability, for over a decade. And Burton only stepped into it because of her passion. So think through that lens as well. And then my last point there is keep in touch with your classmates, because I knew Allie because I was in an MBA program with her in 2012. And definitely keeping in touch with your network helps. And it's your peers. It's not necessarily those that you look to as mentors along the way.
Amazing. I know, as someone who is trying to navigate like environmental work in these industries, Jen, your undergrad experience sounds very close to mine, that this is super helpful, and I'm sure other people probably resonate with your stories as well. At this point in the panel, we have asked all the questions that we have for you all, but at this point, we'd like to open it up to our audience. So anyone who has a question, feel free to raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat, and I'm sure we would love to hear from you. Yeah, I think Aiden has a question.
Hi, thank you all for being here today. I just have a question to the general group, and it's really just about, how do you communicate your CSR sustainability efforts in their particular arenas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, climate, and overall environmental justice authentically? And then how do you measure their impact on consumers? And is that something you really even want to measure in particular?